the heart of the village. In the heart of the village of Afiwa, nestled within the rolling hills of the African countryside, life moved at its own rhythm. Afiwa was a small community where every person was known by name, and the troubles of one were the troubles of all. It was here that I, Adama, a young man of 26, grew up, and it was here that I witnessed the most incredible story of my life. The story, though, is not about me. It's about two people whose lives intertwined in a way that changed the course of their futures and, in turn, our entire village. The first was Kofi, a tall, quiet man in his 30s, known for his skill as a blacksmith. His hammering echoed from the workshop near the edge of the village, shaping iron into tools and weapons with the skill of a master. Kofi wasn't the kind of man who stood out in a crowd, but if you were to spend a day with him, you'd quickly see that his strength went beyond his craft. The second was Amina, a woman who lived on the other side of the village near the dense forest, where the women of Afiwa went to gather firewood. Amina was small but strong, with a spirit as fiery as her auburn hair. She worked as a weaver, creating the most beautiful cloth that the people of Afiwa wore on special occasions. Amina's reputation, however, was not only built on her craft. There was something else about her, something that drew people to her like bees to honey. Her kindness was contagious, and her smile could brighten the darkest of days. But despite their proximity, Kofi and Amina had never spoken much. There were whispers in the village about their potential connection, but like many rumors, they were only stories. One day, something changed. It was the time of the annual harvest festival, a celebration that brought the whole village together. The festival was a joyous occasion filled with singing, dancing, and feasts. It was also a time when young men and women who had spent the year working tirelessly looked for a chance to find companionship. During this festival, it wasn't uncommon for people to look at each other differently, to feel the stirrings of love for the first time. That year, however, something was off. Amina had been feeling a quiet unease that she couldn't shake off. Her usually vibrant self had been subdued, and as she worked, she couldn't stop thinking about the previous night's events. The night before, her father, a respected elder in the village, had fallen ill, and though she loved him dearly, she felt lost as to how to help him. I remember that evening clearly. Amina had been walking back to her hut, her thoughts occupied with the possibility of losing her father when she crossed paths with Kofi. At first, their eyes met briefly, and then, as if by instinct, they stopped. Kofi, usually reserved, was unusually calm. He had noticed the change in Amina's expression, the way she carried herself, and without thinking, he asked her, "Amina, are you okay?" She blinked, surprised by the sudden concern. I'm fine," she replied quickly, trying to hide her worry. Kofi, not one to push, simply nodded. "If there's anything you need, Amina, you know where to find me." That simple offer of help, those few words, lingered in Amina's mind long after she had returned to her hut. As the days passed, Amina found herself seeking Kofi out for small tasks, things that didn't require much effort, but enough to spend time together. Amina needed someone to talk to, and Kofi seemed like the right person. His quiet demeanor offering the peace she desperately needed. She spoke about her father, her hopes, her fears, and Kofi listened. In his silence, she found the comfort she had been longing for. But it wasn't just Amina who began to change. Kofi, the stoic blacksmith, began to open up as well. His words were few, But when he spoke, it was clear that he had been holding on to a lot of pain. His father, whom he had once admired, had passed away when Kofi was young, leaving him to carry the heavy burden of his family's legacy. He had never had the opportunity to grieve properly, to mourn the loss of the man who had shaped him. But with Amina, Kofi found the courage to speak of the things he had buried deep inside. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, the bond between them grew. It wasn't something either of them expected. They had their own lives, their own duties within the village. Kofi had his blacksmithing, and Amina had her weaving and the care of her father. Yet, as the two worked side by side, they began to see something in each other that neither had anticipated. Something that felt real, something that felt like it had always been meant to be. Their connection, though unspoken at first, became undeniable. In the quiet of the evening, when the village had settled into its familiar rhythms, Kofi would often wander to Amina's house. He didn't say much. His presence was enough. And Amina, who once thought of herself as strong and independent, found herself depending on his support in ways she hadn't expected. One night, as they sat outside her hut, watching the stars begin to fill the sky, Amina asked him, "Do you believe in fate, Kofi?" Kofi's gaze shifted from the stars to her, his expression thoughtful. "I don't know about fate," he said slowly, "but I know that I've never been more sure of anything in my life than I am of this of us. We've come together because we were meant to." Amina smiled, her heart swelling with warmth. She had never felt this way before, so sure of her place in the world and so sure of him. The village, ever watchful, saw the change and accepted it with open arms. Their union was not just the coming together of two individuals, but the blending of the old and new, the strength of tradition and the vulnerability of love. It was a love grounded in shared moments, in the days spent working together, in the nights spent speaking of hopes and dreams, and in the quiet times when no words were needed. But love, as we all know, is never without its challenges. Amina's father, despite their best efforts, passed away a year after the festival. His death brought a cloud over their happiness, but it also deepened the connection between them. It was Kofi who stayed by her side through those dark nights, his steady presence, a reminder that she was never alone. As Amina grieved, Kofi did not push her to move on or to forget her father's passing. Instead, he supported her in her mourning, helping her carry the weight of the loss. Together, they planted a tree in memory of her father, symbolizing the deep roots of their shared love and respect for the elders of the village. The tree, a strong baobab, grew tall and wide over the years, a living testament to the legacy of those who had come before. But life, like the seasons, continued to change. And with that change came the deepening of Kofi and Amina's relationship. They decided to marry in a traditional ceremony, surrounded by the elders, the village children, and their closest friends. It was a simple celebration, full of meaning and connection. The women of the village sang songs of praise, while the men gathered to share stories of the couple's kindness and generosity. The day was filled with laughter and joy, but it was also a day of reflection, a reminder that in a village like Afiwa, the bonds we form with others are what keep us grounded. As Amina and Kofi exchanged their vows, promising to stand by each other through the storms of life, the sun set over the village, casting a golden glow over everything. In that moment, it felt as though the entire world was united in their love. Years later, Amina and Kofi would have children of their own, and their story would become a legend in the village of Afiwa. The children would learn of their parents' love, of the quiet strength that bound them together, and of how two souls, one forged in the fire of the forge, the other woven into the fabric of the village, had found each other in the most unexpected of ways. And when I think back to those days, I see them, Kofi and Amina, working side by side, their hearts beating in unison. I see them as a symbol of love, not as some grand tale of destiny, but as a reminder that the most beautiful stories are often those that unfold quietly, with patience, and with a deep understanding that love, like the village itself, is built one small act at a time. As the years passed, Amina's weaving grew to be known beyond Afiwa, and Kofi's blacksmithing was sought after by villagers from neighboring towns. But even as their crafts brought them success, they never lost sight of what mattered most: their shared life in the village, the community that had supported them, and the love that had grown between them. They never sought to change the rhythm of their lives, to seek fortune or fame outside of the village. Instead, they found contentment in the simple, profound connection they had with one another. The children they raised grew up with the stories of their parents, of how love had flourished, not through grand gestures, but through quiet acts of kindness, through understanding, and through the steadfast support of a community that never let go. In the end, Afiwa remained the same: small, close knit, and ever changing, just like the love of Kofi and Amina, whose legacy would echo through the village for generations to come. And I, Adama, will always remember how their love became the heartbeat of our village.